When extremism gets a government office, let us begin with the part nobody should be allowed to bury beneath. 40 years of diplomatic language. On October 11, 1985, Alex Odeh walked up to the door of his office in Santa Ana, California. He was 41 years old, married, and the father of 3 young daughters. He was the Western Regional Director of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. When he unlocked the door, a bomb exploded, killing him, injuring others, and devastating the building. Today, the FBI still lists the murder as an open domestic bombing case, and the United States government is offering up to $1 million for information, leading to an arrest and conviction. FBI. 40 years. 40 years for a bomb planted on American soil. 40 years for a political assassination, targeting an American civil rights office. 40 years for 3 daughters to grow up without their father, while the most powerful law enforcement machinery on Earth continues displaying his photograph beneath the words "seeking information." Do not call that closure. Do not even call it justice delayed. Justice delayed usually suggests that justice is still walking toward the courthouse. This looks more like justice was stuffed into a diplomatic trunk, driven to the airport and told never to embarrass an ally. No one has been charged in Odeh's murder. That fact matters. Allegations are not convictions, and a serious argument cannot manufacture a verdict that a court never delivered. But the absence of charges does not erase the documented history surrounding the case. The 2026 documentary Who Killed Alex Odeh, as reported by the Israeli publication Wenet, identifies 3 Jewish Defense League activists, Robert Manning, Keith Fox, and Andy Green, as the men whom investigators reportedly treated as prime suspects. According to that reporting, they were in California around the time of the assassination and departed for Israel soon afterward. Andy Green subsequently became known in Israel as attorney Baruch Ben Yosef, Wenet Global. Ben Yosef has not been convicted of killing Alex Odeh. Say that clearly, then say the rest just as clearly. According to the documentary, retired Santa Ana investigator Hugh Mooney says police and FBI investigators identified the 3 men as prime suspects, but attempts to obtain warrants were blocked amid political and diplomatic interference. Mooney further alleges that Israeli security authorities possessed information but declined cooperation for political reasons. Those are the retired investigator's allegations. Not an adjudicated finding, but they are serious, enough to demand scrutiny rather than 40 more years of official throat-clearing. Wenet Global. Robert Manning was eventually extradited from Israel and prosecuted, not for Odeh's murder, but for an entirely separate bombing that killed Patricia Wilkerson, a secretary who opened a package intended for her employer. The other 2 men identified by the documentary remained in Israel, where Green became Baruch Ben Yosef and established himself inside the Kahanist political and legal world, Wenet Global. And this is where the past stops being history and walks directly into the current Israeli government. Itamar Ben-Gvir, the man Benjamin Netanyahu empowered as Israel's Minister of National Security, once interned in Baruch Ben Yosef's law office. The Israeli report covering the documentary explicitly identifies that relationship. Wenet Global. That does not mean Ben-Gvir participated in Odeh's murder. It means something politically different and profoundly disturbing. It means the ideological environment surrounding a prime suspect in an unresolved American political assassination did not remain quarantined in some abandoned basement of history. It became a training ground. It became a professional network. It became a political ladder. And eventually, one of the men, shaped inside that broader Kahanist ecosystem, was handed authority over a nation's police. As of August 2026, Ben-Gvir remains Israel's national security minister. Netanyahu's governing coalition still includes Ben-Gvir's Jewish Power party, alongside Likud and Bezalel, Smotrich's religious Zionism. Reuters has described the government Netanyahu formed in 2022 as the most right-wing in Israel's history. Government of Israel. Netanyahu did not wake up one morning and discover Ben-Gvir hiding underneath the cabinet table. He built the arrangement. He helped unite the extremist parties required to return himself to power. And then he awarded Ben-Gvir the national security portfolio. Reporting on Ben-Gvir's rise describes Jewish Power as an ideological offshoot of Kach, the movement founded by Mir Kahane. Ben-Gvir had been a Kach youth activist and was convicted in the past on charges, including supporting a terrorist organization and incitement to racism. The New Yorker. Kach was not merely criticized as controversial. The Israeli government itself declared Kach and Kahane Chai terrorist organizations in 1994. The United States also designated Kahane Chai under its terrorism authorities In 2022, the State Department said there was good reason for the organization to remain designated as a specially designated global terrorist entity. State Department. Understand what happened here. The ideology was not defeated. It changed clothes. It traded the street demonstration for the television studio. It traded the movement office for the law office. It traded the clenched fist for the campaign logo. It learned which words triggered prosecution, replaced them with legally sanitized versions, and marched straight through the front door of government. That is not moderation. That is political money laundering for extremism. You take an ideology once treated as beyond the democratic perimeter, rinse it through elections, alliances, and respectable titles, and suddenly the people shaped by it are not being monitored by the police. They are supervising the police. And Netanyahu is not an innocent passenger in this vehicle. He is the mechanic who assembled it because he needed enough seats to remain prime minister. According to the Odeh documentary's account, Netanyahu was questioned about the murder during a 1998 visit to Washington and pledged Israeli cooperation. Nearly 3 decades after that alleged promise, and more than 4 decades after the bombing, the FBI is still offering $1 million for answers. Inet Global. A promise followed by decades of nothing is not cooperation. It is choreography. It is what governments perform when they want the appearance of concern without the inconvenience of accountability. And today, the political heir to the movement surrounding that history sits in Netanyahu's cabinet with power over policing and internal security. 5 governments, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom, jointly imposed sanctions and other measures against Ben-Gvir and Smotrich in June 2025, accusing them of repeatedly inciting violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. Those were not declarations from anonymous social media accounts. They were coordinated actions announced by allied democratic governments, DFAT. Yet we are still expected to pretend that questioning Netanyahu's decision to empower Ben-Gvir is somehow radical. No, the radical act was giving him the ministry. The radical act was taking an ideological tradition, once associated with an outlawed movement, and placing it near the machinery of state violence. The radical act was teaching the world that extremism is unacceptable only until an embattled prime minister needs its parliamentary votes, and America's role deserves its own indictment. The United States cannot spend decades declaring that political violence will be pursued everywhere, at all times, without fear or favor, then develop diplomatic amnesia when the trail becomes inconvenient. A bomb exploded in California. An American civil rights advocate was murdered. American citizens were injured. An American family was shattered. That is not an internal Israeli matter. It is an American murder investigation. An alliance is not a permission slip to obstruct justice. A strategic partnership does not transform a political assassination into a sensitive misunderstanding. No foreign government should receive an exemption from cooperation, because accountability might embarrass its coalition partners, its ideological allies, or the politicians it has chosen to elevate, and spare us the argument that demanding answers is somehow hostile to Israel. A genuine friend does not help a country normalize the forces most capable of morally destroying it. Kahanism is dangerous to Palestinians, dangerous to Arab citizens of Israel, dangerous to Israeli democracy, and dangerous to every Jewish person around the world, who will inevitably be smeared with responsibility for actions they neither committed nor supported. Jewish people are not Ben-Gvir. Israelis are not Netanyahu. A government is not a religion. A cabinet is not an ethnicity. And criticism of named officials, documented ideological networks, and an unresolved bombing investigation is not collective blame. It is the exact opposite. It refuses to hold millions of ordinary people responsible for the choices of powerful men. The demand should be painfully simple. The United States Department of Justice must conduct a transparent review of the Odeh investigation. Congress should hold public oversight hearings, examining whether diplomatic considerations obstructed warrants, evidence sharing, or extradition efforts. The FBI should disclose every legally releasable portion of the case record. Israeli authorities should provide complete cooperation concerning every living person identified by investigators, while preserving due process and the presumption of innocence. And where admissible evidence establishes probable cause, prosecutors should act, regardless of the suspect's religion, nationality, ideology, or political connections, because terrorism does not stop being terrorism when the alleged perpetrator shares the faith of an allied nation. A murdered Palestinian American does not become less American because his killers may have wrapped themselves in a cause Washington found diplomatically inconvenient to confront. And an extremist ideology does not become democratic merely because Netanyahu needed it to reach 61 seats. Alex Odeh opened a door and was murdered by a bomb. 40 years later, the ideology surrounding the unresolved case has not been buried. It has climbed through law offices, settlements, political parties, and coalition negotiations until it reached the cabinet table. That is the scandal. Not guilt by association, power through normalization. Not proof that today's government committed yesterday's murder. Proof that an extremist ecosystem was never truly uprooted, and that Benjamin Netanyahu was willing to harvest its votes, reward its leaders, and hand one of its most successful products, authority over national security. That is not acceptable. It is not acceptable from Israel. It is not acceptable from the United States. It is not acceptable from any government that claims terrorism is terrorism. Justice is universal, and murder does not come with a diplomatic statute of limitations. 40 years is long enough. Open the files. Demand the cooperation. Follow the evidence. And stop treating justice like something America practices only when the suspect lives in a country it is willing to offend.